Well, first, I want to thank everybody for being here. I especially want to thank everything that the people around me have been working on so very much. Chief Nimkid, who has been one of the leaders of helping to respond to COVID-19. We have General Norris, who's done a tremendous job, in part helping Texas respond to COVID-19, but also help respond to instill a sense of safety and security in our communities to allow peaceful protests to occur. Also want to call out in particular Director McCraw, who has been involved across the entire state over the past week, making sure that our communities are as safe as possible. But also all these people behind the cameras who have been manning this emergency operation center for everything that you've been working on during the course of responding to COVID-19. Well, in typical Texas fashion, we are dealing with multiple challenges at one particular time. And what we are here to talk about today is the status of this tropical storm. You can see the map of it behind me. I'm going to be making reference to that map at this time as we talk about the pathway of Cristobal, where it is, where it's going, what the probabilities look like, and then what the preparation is as we are speaking at this time. So if we had a briefing upon the likely path of this storm, and you can see the tracking of it right now, and it's, the highest probability is that it will be crossing the Gulf Coast and hitting the state of Louisiana. You can also see from the screen right now, even along its most highly probable course, that it will be affecting East Texas in wide swaths of East Texas, providing a tremendous amount of rainfall as well as potential flooding in East Texas, all the way from northern reaches of East Texas all the way down to the Gulf Coast, stretching potentially as far west as Dallas. And that is based upon the current prognosticated forecast. A concern we have, of course, is the potential that as the storm crosses the Gulf Coast, you can see even under current modeling, it begins to move a little bit toward the west before it reaches the shoreline. If that western trajectory begins earlier or becomes more pronounced, it means that Texas will be a greater focal point for where that storm may come across the land. Right now, it is categorized as a likely tropical storm. There is the possibility that as it goes across the hot waters of the Gulf Coast, that it could turn into a hurricane. That's not the current prognostication. It is a possibility of what could happen. And so what our goal is to deal with what is going to likely be a very heavy rain event in various regions of East Texas, and we also want to make sure that we are preparing for potential high wind, especially in the southeast Texas region. And the landfall that we are currently expecting will be on Sunday. Of course, we will be monitoring this across the entire weekend to update that on when we do expect landfall and where we will expect landfall. So before coming out here, I had the opportunity to have a briefing with the leaders from across the entire state of Texas to make sure that we are prepared to respond to this. And then in addition to that, before visiting with these leaders, I had the opportunity to speak to local officials to make sure that the local officials had access to all the resources they need to respond to a potential storm of whatever type of category, and to make sure that we were working collaboratively together to help respond to the needs of their residents and citizens. So the report from the National Guard is that troops have been made available to deal especially with a potential flooding event. They are providing high water vehicles as well as rescue helicopters and planes as needed to make sure that any type of evacuation situation will be able to be handled. The Texas Department of Public Safety is providing tactical Marine unit to assist in search and rescue operations. Texas Task Force 1 and 2 are involved, and they are providing air assets as well as water assets to rescue as needed, including swift water rescue teams. The Texas Parks and Wildlife, they have a game warden strike force team that is prepared to respond as needed, especially with regard to any types of water rescues that may be necessary. The Texas Forest Service is particularly involved in this situation because the areas where the storm is most likely to strike are areas where we have the most dense forest in the state of Texas. And they have their incident management teams engaged. They have heavy equipment available to respond and assist in any way that could be necessary, as well as they have high water rescue vehicles that are available. They have chainsaw crews that could be needed because of however the storm may affect the timber areas there in Deep East Texas. And they are also coordinating with firefighters across that entire region. The Texas Department of Transportation, they are working to be prepared to clear any type of debris that could accumulate along roadways to make sure that we have clear and open roadways. And a key thing that they are prepared for is any type of flooding of roadways. The Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, they have activated offices to be prepared to respond in multiple regions, from Houston to Beaumont to Tyler. And will be ready to deal with any of the environmental consequences of this particular storm. Again, as the current forecast shows, this looks like it would be a rain event and nothing more. And if that's the case, there probably will not be any, or at least very few, environmental-based issues, but we always plan for the worst-case scenario. The Health and Human Services Commission has, for one, done a tremendous job with helping respond to COVID-19, and they are applying that to our response to this storm in several things. One is they're focusing on the 211 call system. 211 system coordinates with local emergency responders. The point is, if people have challenges that need to be met, they should be calling 211. And they are preparing, in particular, senior centers for potential evacuation. So we've dealt with countless tropical storms probably every year, and hurricanes frequently. This situation is different from other types of storms we've dealt with in the past, because this is the first one that I'm aware of where we had to deal with a storm while at the same time deal with a pandemic. And so we have to approach this with greater caution and greater response, and one of the areas where that is particularly needed is in the nursing home setting. And that is a setting that the Health and Human Services Commission is in charge of addressing. And so I want to emphasize that we have strategies in place already in the event that it's needed to ensure that those in nursing homes in the affected area will be able to be moved very safely. And when I mean safely, obviously in the usual safe standards, but also safely as in COVID-19 safe, to make sure that we're able to separate those who test positive and negative for COVID-19 and keep them separated, doing all we can to prevent any other type of spread, and also to protect the health and safety of everyone who may currently have COVID-19. And so that applies particularly with senior centers that Health and Human Services Commission is working on, but it also applies generally in the response to this particular tropical storm event. So as local officials go about their task of responding to this tropical storm challenge, they need to be cognizant constantly about the possibility that this could stoke people coming together in ways that could transmit COVID-19. As a result, one thing that we are asking, and that is, as local officials go about the process of evacuation, if evacuation is needed, they adopt strategies here that are different than what their typical strategies may be. They utilize vehicles that will be far more numerous in number so that there can be greater spacing than is typically used, that they consider using for locations to evacuate people to, not convention center type settings like what they may have used in the past where you would have a lot of people congregating together, but instead consider the availability of hotels or motels or other settings where family units would be able to be in a room by themselves without exposing themselves to others, using those types of strategies that will always keep in mind the ongoing need to deal with the ongoing existence of COVID-19 in the state of Texas, and understanding that as we respond to this tropical storm, we must respond in ways that continue to contain the spread of COVID-19. So along those lines, another agency that is at the centerpiece of responding to COVID-19 is the Department of State Health Services, and they are working to coordinate the COVID-19 response to this tropical storm with the populations most affected. Last is the preparation that we are urging residents in the most likely affected regions, deep East Texas, residents who live within a 50-mile distance of the Sabine River, to be prepared for evacuation. There could be rising water coming up, and there could be short notice for evacuation, and we don't know right now what may be needed. The time to get ready for a very quick evacuation would be right now, knowing that the time for that evacuation could be Sunday or it could be Monday, but Sunday or Monday may be too late to prepare for what could be an oncoming evacuation. And along those lines, our advice is, as it usually is, and that is stay in constant contact of hearing from your local officials about what the likelihood may be for a potential evacuation. And as I say, prepare to respond swiftly, and for the residents of Texas who themselves have been focused on containing the spread of COVID-19, as you go through that evacuation process, maintain those safe standards to make sure that you are not exposing yourself to contracting COVID-19, or you may have COVID-19. Make sure that you're doing everything that you can not to expose others to COVID-19. With that, I'll pass it off to Chief Nim Kidd of the Texas Division of Emergency Management.
Thank you, Governor. As Cristobal appears to have its eyes on the Gulf, Texans, or its eyes on Louisiana, Texans really need to keep their eyes turned to the Gulf right now. Any wobble of this storm could have more of an impact to the state of Texas than is currently predicted. Governor, I really want to thank all of our local elected officials who, in response to COVID-19, have also been preparing their hurricane plans and their evacuation plans. A lot of teamwork at the local level doing double duty, in addition to the state agencies and the men and women in this room. The local partnership in this is going to be critical. It's our local elected officials who have the authority under state law to mandate evacuations. And we really want to make sure that through this entire hurricane season, we're maintaining that contact with them. We need our media partners to be paying attention to the weather as well and sharing that information with our citizens. We cannot have any missteps in evacuation. As the governor mentioned, we want safe evacuations. And how we used to be able to put 50 people on a bus, that number may be down to 15 now. So working very close with the comptroller and the state procurement team to make sure that the right resources and enough of those resources are available. But this will mean earlier evacuation than what we may have normally seen in the past. And frankly, it may also mean evacuations for storms that we might not have evacuated in the past for. Our communication over this hurricane season is going to be extremely critical because of COVID-19. The state teams have done a remarkable job of making sure that we have plenty of personal protective equipment and cleaning supplies available. Our local partners are helping us with shelter. Our federal partners are helping us with hotels and motels. And as people ready their preparedness kits, this is a message of preparedness today. As you prepare your family's evacuation plan, if you live in an area that you may need to evacuate from, think about your personal protective equipment, think about masks, think about hand sanitizer, think about all of those things that you would want to make sure that the environment you're going into is as clean and safe as the environment that you are coming from. Our local officials will be key to this, and I'm very grateful for their partnership. So thank you.
Thank you. And now, General Tracy Norris.
Yes, sir. Thank you. The Texas Military Department is currently involved in multiple complex operations. However, hurricane season is never far from our minds, and we have been preparing and are prepared for this anticipated storm season. We recently conducted our annual hurricane rehearsal exercise in conjunction with Department of Emergency Management as well as other state agencies in order to review appropriate courses of action concerning equipment and personnel needed in a variety of given scenarios. For Cristobal, as we do with every storm, we have coordinated with the Texas Division of Emergency Management in developing concepts of operations in anticipation of landfall. We have identified available personnel and equipment that may be required to respond, and they will be positioned in a location to quickly deploy if needed. Our mission-ready packages can rapidly be dispersed anywhere in the state. I assure you, the Texas Military Department, which is your Texas National Guard and State Guard, are ready and able to support Governor Abbott and the citizens of Texas with a ready force that is manned, equipped, and trained for this mission. We are always ready, we're always there, and we are Texans serving Texas.
Thank you. Now we'll open up for a few questions. All right, have a good day. Come on, I was going to say, Rudy, Shirley, you got a question. What's the...
I'm trying to be nicer in this age. You mentioned how difficult and how this is so much different from other storms that we've had. What have you personally said to the rank and file that are out there that will have to be responding to this? What is your message to them to protecting themselves?
So we spoke to local leaders, and we've spoken to all the different groups that will be responding to this. And a key focal point that we wanted to remind them of is the potential for exposure to COVID-19. So as they approach this particular response, they need to do so strategically in ways to ensure that COVID-19 is not spread. This cannot be a type of event that would lead to a mass expansion of COVID-19 instead of Texas, and the ability to contain that will be the way that the public responds to this particular storm.
Building on that, are you worried? I mean, there's so much that's happening right now, from social unrest to the storm, COVID-19. You're trying to reopen the state. We're heading up a new phase and all that. Have you given thought to suspending this new phase?
So I had the opportunity to speak with Dr. Birx of the White House Coronavirus Response Team about this very issue 2 days ago, as we talked about the potential for wider spread of COVID-19 coming from the large amount of protesters who are gathered so closely together. When you have that many people that close together for such a long period of time, that is the type of situation that could lead to the spread of COVID-19. One of our responses to that is on Monday, we will be locating additional testing operations in areas near and around those areas where protests have taken place, so that we can better assess the extent to which the protest may have led to an expansion of COVID-19. Separate from that, of course, now we are dealing with potential evacuations and potential responses to this tropical storm. And so that accelerates the concerns about the concern for the spread of COVID-19. Bottom line is we just need to wait and see what the numbers look like. Our hope and our focal point will be that everybody will be doing what is necessary to minimize the expansion of COVID-19 and allow us to continue to open up Texas for business.
Governor, I know you called for the resignations of some GOP county officials over racist social media posts. But more broadly, what is your diagnosis of why people in your party who hold these views have been able to elevate to these positions of leadership?
Listen, the only point is not a broad point, but it's a narrow point. And the narrow point is this, and that is the death of George Floyd is a travesty, and it's a result of a criminal act. And it should not be the subject of any of these conspiracy theories, and it's irresponsible for anyone to promote some conspiracy theory of what is otherwise a brutal act of police violence.
We would attend George Floyd's funeral.
Before we get off topic here, any more questions about the hurricane? We do need to get this information out. Any more questions about the hurricane?
So what degree do you expect this storm to impact Houston, especially with George Floyd Memorial on Monday and Tuesday? We're going to be seeing people in the community.
So right now, at worst, it would be a minimal rain event, with the emphasis being right now. We'll just need to see which way that it tracks, so we will know more about that in 24 to 48 hours.
Do you have any protocols or plans in place if it does have a wobble like you all described and shift more towards that area, given everything that's going on?
The planners of that funeral would be in charge of that.
Governor, will you attend the funeral?
Jason, we're going to go over quick. Does anyone else have anything? Yeah, go ahead.
Chief, you mentioned in regards to the evacuation buses that the way the strategies are going to have to change. 50 buses, probably down to 10 or 20 something. What about evacuation centers? If not this storm, the next storm, how are we going to handle evacuation centers? I mean, I remember the ones here in Austin. They were packed with people stacked on top of people. How are we going to handle this thing? Are y'all thinking that?
So absolutely, Rudy, and I really want to thank our federal partners at FEMA working with us and the State Comptroller's Office for contracts and availability for hotels. So a shelter that would have normally held 150 people may only take 50 people right now. Where we used to use the footprint of 60 square foot per person, we're looking at a minimum of 110 square foot per person. So the additional centers we will need more of, working with local partners to get those. But we'll also open up hotels and motels. In the past, hotels and motels were not used as congregate settings during an evacuation. So we will have access to those now earlier on. For people that can drive on their own way, they will still go to a shelter reception hub and then be given maps or of the shelters or the hotels to go to. So we're really comfortable those that are in their cars would be just like driving up through a drive-through testing lane, if you will, to be able to get that testing and then separate them out. The other thing, Rudy, that we're working on in the shelters is additional cleaning teams and additional cleaning supplies and PPE for each one of the shelters.
Jason Walker, real quick, last question, we got to go.
I imagine that a COVID response to a hurricane is much more expensive than a traditional one. If this turns out to be a busy hurricane season for us, what kind of effects is that going to have on state resources, on the budget, things like that?
Well, again, we'll have to see. It's a hypothetical. We don't know how many storms we will have, and so I can't give you some type of mathematical prediction to your question. All I can tell you is this, and that is this team right here and the larger team that we had in the room earlier, they're prepared. They're prepared for a hurricane. They're prepared for the very worst situation. And so whatever nature may bring our way, we're going to be prepared to deal with it.